Hello, just a quick thing. You may notice in the background I've got a world map. This is an up-to-date world map, you can tell, because if I just put my head down quickly, sorry about that, go a wee bit closer, perhaps you can see that South Sudan is on that map, so that's what I've been looking for a world map for some time. I always check that first to make sure it's up to date, because a lot of them haven't included the partition of Sudan. That's sort of the barometer I use. Anyway, that's utterly unconnected to the video. I was just mentioning that. There's a lot of things going on in the world right now, so there's any number of things I could comment on. But for now, I want to speak a bit about the European elections. Apologies if I have a little bit of a lisp. I've got a mouth ulcer at the moment. So, there's been pretty important results from these elections. They seem to be getting more attention this year than usual. European elections happen every few years, but these ones seem to be getting significantly more attention than usual, from my perspective. The big sort of trend in these elections have been big electoral gains across Europe for both the far right and the hard left. Far right itself may be a contentious term in some cases. In the UK, for now I'll focus on the UK just to give an outline of the other results. So Angela Merkel's done well in Germany. In Italy, the new Prime Minister Matteo Renzi, I understand, has done well. In France, President Hollande has said that the role of Europe must decrease, not increase, decrease. That's my understanding of what his position is. Basically, these elections have been a bit of a backlash against the European establishment, that is, establishment parties, pro-EU establishment parties, at least that's their perception. From that point of view, they're pretty significant. The big news in Britain is the success of UKIP. It is now the largest British political party in the EU. They have 23 seats. Labour and the Conservatives have 18 each. I don't know what the Lib Dems were. I haven't had time to focus in detail on this because I've been following developments in Thailand and the election in India and other news, so I haven't had time to focus in detail. But the general picture seems to be that the coalition government in Britain has done badly. The Lib Dems have been especially hard hit. There's already questions about Nick Clegg's leadership. Labour, the picture is a bit mixed because they've done well, actually, electorally speaking, but there's a lot of dissatisfaction about the way that Ed Miliband has led the party during the last few weeks, and some of the approaches that they have used. From my perspective, just a quick word about that, it's a little bit strange for Labour to be turning on the leader that has brought them some of the best electoral success for years. But I can understand some of the controversy about that, because Labour did stoop to some pretty low levels during their electioneering in terms of caricaturing of political opponents, especially Nick Clegg. I thought went below party politics, and certainly not worthy of professional politicians, not people who want to, not from a man who wants to be Prime Minister in Mr. Miliband. So I can understand some of that critique. Also, with the Labour Party, I personally didn't like the survey that they put out on their own Facebook page, which was very arrogant, very sort of directed towards upping themselves up, rather than being an objective survey about generally what people were concerned about. But Labour has done well. UKIP, this is the big story though. UKIP has done pretty well. Not so well in London, but across Britain they have done pretty well. And the fact is, they are now the largest British political party in the EU. They have more seats than any other British party. That should definitely produce a strong debate in this country about what role they have, about the issues that, you know, I think the left is making a grave mistake here by trivializing, or actually not trivializing, demonizing UKIP supporters and sort of trying to swipe the issues that they're talking about under the carpet. I think that's a big mistake. Whatever you think of UKIP, when any political party gets support, you have to look at the reasons why they're getting that support, rather than just rubbishing it, rather than just calling its supporters idiots or racists. You have to look deeper into the reasons. And just to make my position clear, I am absolutely not a UKIP supporter. There's many areas I actually have contempt for UKIP on. However, I think as a centrist, I don't like the approach the hard left has taken either, of simply demonising all UKIP supporters as racists. I think that's unfair. There's no doubt about it, UKIP has more than its fair share of extremists, and whether they have extreme homophobic views, sexist views, or in many occasions, yes, racist views. But the leader of the party, there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that Nigel Farage is personally a racist. And certainly as a leader, I think he's tried to go out of his way to prove otherwise. He is right to say that every party gets people like that in its midst. However, when UKIP complain, you know, I've got very mixed views on this, because as someone who really doesn't like UKIP, I also go by the mantra of I hate what you're saying, but I will defend to death your right to say it. And the left do have a tendency to try and shout anyone down who dares mention politically incorrect subjects. Now, I'm not talking about these councillors who are basically just nut jobs and who've come out with all sorts of bizarre things. Like, there was one councillor who tried to blame the floods at the start of this year on gay marriage, things like that. I have no interest in defending people like that. They're idiots. However, I think that there is an important issue to be had here, and that is that from the political left, they will not discuss the issues that UKIP voters are concerned about. They will not address the issues of immigration. Certainly not in the way that they should be doing. Now, to be fair to Nick Clegg, and you know, very few British politicians have been vilified as much as he has in the past few years. I can understand students being angry with Nick Clegg, and I was certainly very angry when he, with his position on workfare. But he has actually regained some of my respect by standing up to UKIP and by standing up to the anti-EU hysteria in this country. Now, there's no doubt about it, Nick Clegg is an underdog in public opinion. There's no question about that. But I do respect the fact that he has went in there, he's debated the issues. I don't care if he lost the debate. The point is right and wrong. Politics isn't a game. It's not like scoring points. It's about the right argument. Now, in my opinion, Nick Clegg is right, and UKIP are wrong. And I'm talking about the fundamental issue here of pulling out of Europe. Now, they speak about unlimited EU immigration into Britain. What they don't mention is that many British jobs are directly related to the EU. I would like to see UKIP actually address that issue. And they just don't. And there's no doubt about it. I've even heard UKIP supporters say they have been uncomfortable about the way the party is using immigration as an election tool. When parties do that, when they rely on that one issue, that should open up questions about what their agenda is. Having said that, when the left try to imply or insinuate that it's not an issue at all, I think they're equally wrong. The fact of the matter is, Britain is a country of 64 million people. We are the world's 79th country in area, but 22nd in population. So, immigration is a real issue in this country. What I take issue with in the case of UKIP is that they make it the #1 issue. I do think that's a mistake, and I do think it will lead to xenophobia and neo-nationalism. Even if that isn't Nigel Farage's intentions, that is what it will lead to. And as leader, he has responsibility to make sure that is not the byproduct. Now, I have no doubt there will be people from far-right organisations that are voting UKIP. I'm not saying that everyone who votes UKIP is, but they will be attracted to it because they will see it as sort of the respectable banner that they can go to. So Nigel Farage is right to crack down on those people, because if he wants to be a party of government, you cannot have extremist elements in that. And certainly there's organisations like Britain First that UKIP should be very, very careful about associating with, because when you look at the background to those organisations, and I've made another video about this, it's basically blood and soil, ethnocentric nationalism, and it's dangerous. It is dangerous. So the left is not wrong about that. However, I do think they are wrong to vilify UKIP completely and not look at some of the issues that UKIP is raising. For one thing, what this election should show. Now, I'm pro-EU. Let me make this very, very clear. I am pro-EU. That does not mean, I repeat, that does not mean I'm a sycophant. It does not mean that I blindly agree with everything the EU does. And I do think some EU supporters are guilty of not listening to very legitimate concerns. I'm an EU supporter. That does not mean that I don't recognise the concerns. Now, I think Nick Clegg has tried to do that. He has tried to take that position of being pro-EU, but trying to understand the concerns that people have. And I think he done it in a very reasonable manner. It's not like he went into those debates and said, oh, Europe is great, let's not be idiots, let's not be little Englanders, let's all grovel to Brussels. Nothing of the sort. He came in there with a very objective and reasonable argument. He was arguing for Britain, much more than for the EU. He was arguing for Britain, and he was simply saying that we are in a stronger position in the EU. Now, what UKIP people will say is, oh, Clegg's a traitor. He is a cheerleader for this EU dictatorship. And when they use that sort of language, it pisses me off, because the EU, for all its faults, is not a dictatorship. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this process of an election. And if UKIP thinks it's an illegitimate election, then they shouldn't be hypocrites and they shouldn't field any candidates. So to me, UKIP is a very hypocritical party, because they talk about being against the EU, but they're endorsing the EU by taking part in the election process. In other words, they're legitimising it as a democratic body. I mean, you can't call the EU a dictatorship and then take part in democratic elections and say that you're against it. That's just inconsistent. I'm not saying Nigel Farage has called the EU a dictatorship, but many of its supporters do. Having said that, there is a school of thought within the European Union that wants United States of Europe. I think those of us who are pro-EU have to acknowledge that that faction does exist, especially those from Germany. This may be politically incorrect to say so, but we have to acknowledge it. And sovereignty is a paramount issue. So people who are concerned about the EU have every right to be concerned about that. It's an entirely legitimate thing, and I have to admit, in recent years I have been increasingly concerned about that as well. So people who blindly follow the EU need to get out of the bubble and start to accept that not everyone who is uneasy about it is some sort of far-right extremist. There's millions and millions of Europeans, ordinary Europeans, who have concerns about the EU. I think UKIP is wrong. UKIP supporters are wrong to call it a dictatorship. If you want a dictatorship, go to North Korea. That's a dictatorship. So I think the word is misplaced. However, what would be a better term is an organisation that is arrogant. I would agree with that. I do believe that the bureaucrats in Brussels do take an incredibly arrogant attitude to European opinions. And I do take issue with that. I support UKIP's right to exist. I support their democratic right to campaign against the EU. I just think that they're wrong about it. I think it would be a huge mistake pulling out of the world's largest economic bloc. I think it makes much more sense for us to stay in the EU with all the clear advantages that has for this country, although they won't be reported by the Murdoch press, but believe me, there are many advantages. And then call for reforms within the European Union. We will never be ruled by Angela Merkel. And if I come to a point where I think there's a clear-cut case that our sovereignty is going to be completely lost to Brussels, I may well completely change my ideology on this. But for now, I cannot see any rational argument, apart from the propaganda, apart from the distortion that they're putting out, of leaving the European Union. And it isn't just the hard right, it's also the hard left, because they see the EU as a globalist organisation, and that goes against their socialist ideas. There's so many things I want to talk about in this video, and time is limited, but what else can I talk about? I think it does bug me when the left use the classic R word anytime anyone talks about immigration. It does piss me off. I know that there are people out there, neoliberals or hard leftists, the second you mention the word immigration, they'll automatically assume you're some sort of far-right neo-Nazi. That's pathetic, and it's so wrong, because whilst there will certainly be people like that, simply talking about immigration and being critical of some aspects of it is not racist. And I think Nigel Farage is right to say that. I do agree with him there. I think he is right to insist that the immigration debate is not racist. What he has to be careful with, though, is that the electioneering of his party doesn't go down a route of scapegoating immigrants and stirring up hostility towards Romanians and Bulgarians. That is a problem if it goes down that path, because they're not responsible for political decisions, and it's always a sign of desperation when any political party scapegoats outsiders. In my opinion, that is not healthy. So I'll have to wrap up here, because I really am coming to the end of the bandwidth, but there's a lot of issues to consider with this. Some closing thoughts. The EU needs to listen to its citizens, but that doesn't mean we should leave the EU.